Chloe, and I'm here from Eng Lang Pro to talk to you VCE English language students and explain a little bit about one of the dot points in 3-4 VCE English language. Eng Lang Pro has such a wide variety of these YouTube videos to help you guys out, and I encourage you to check out all of our other YouTube videos on so many different topics. But today we're going to be talking about code switching, specifically in context of Unit 4, Area of Study 2. So this is the last area of study you will do before your exam, and it will mostly be in relation to essays. So this kind of discussion will fit into essays. You should be able to identify, hopefully, some essay topics that you could use to fit with this sort of prompt, that would fit into this area. But yeah, there's definitely other videos that can help you out with that. We're just going to be going through a little bit about why people code switch, what code switching is, and how we would go about unpacking it and discussing it within our essay. So just covering the study design dot point, code switching as a means of demonstrating group membership or in-group membership and belonging. So code switching essentially is when we change our language in order to fit in with others in this circumstance, but generally just changing our language from one version to sort of another version. So we hear about code switching a lot when we're talking about ethnolects and how we would code switch, if you will, from like standard Australian English to like Italian, or like standard Australian English to a Greek ethnolect or something like that. And it just sort of means that you're switching from one language to another, or you're incorporating a bit of that other language into your English. So if I'm kind of speaking and then I just start speaking, like chuck in a couple of Greek words for you, then that would be a bit of a code switch. So even though you can code switch between literal languages, you can also code switch between like types of language. So for example, you might code switch between formal language and informal language, and you sort of switch between the two. Or you might code switch between like, I suppose, really educated language and a bit of uneducated language, and sort of uneducated language, or it's like non-standard language, or language that shows different parts of your identity. So if you think about it, when you're going about in your daily life, you will change your language depending on where you are and who you're with. And I'm sure this is a concept that everyone's familiar with, that if I am at uni, I'm going to change my language to compared to when I'm with my family at home, or compared to if I'm going to speak at Parliament, as if I'm doing that. But if I was, I would be changing my language to fit with that circumstance and to fit with the people around me. So that's how I would code switch in those situations. So that sort of can come down to the changing of the actual words we use, so like lexical features, and then as well as that, like phonetically and all of the different subsystems can change. We're code switching based on the environment we're in. So some of the areas we sort of look at in terms of like this area of study would be code switching in regards to age-related language, and then SES, so socioeconomic status and occupation, education, interests and hobbies. So all of those different parts of your identity can come through in the way that you speak, and you might code switch depending on who you're with in terms of those areas. Well, I'll explain more. So, for example, assuming most of you watching this are teenagers, as like when you are a teenager, obviously you speak this age-related language, which we can kind of call teen speak, but you're not meant to say that in your essays. But yeah, so this age-related language like the teenagers speak, right? So we talk with slang and basically how I'm talking right now. It's probably a bit more informal. But as I'm sure you're aware, sometimes like people who don't necessarily speak that teen speak will try and use those features. So when like adults, essentially like proper adults, I'm an adult, but proper adults, think like basically people just out of our generation, so millennials and above, but especially like our parents' age. When people our parents' age and above try to speak like teenagers, they're trying to get down with the young people, and they're trying to entertain you and be really cool. Think, I don't know if this is going to ring a bell for everyone, but think like Regina George's mum in Mean Girls. She's all like, I'm not a regular mum, I'm a cool mum, like I speak with the teen slang. So a lot of older people will try and do that. So they're trying to code switch. In that circumstance, they have their set the way that they actually speak, which is their age-related language. And then sometimes when they're with teenagers, or maybe if they're not even with teenagers, they try to they try to code switch to this age-related language of teenagers, to this younger language. And they'll sort of like start bringing in some random teen slang. So there's one example. Another example is when politicians or really educated people, so you might have like a doctor or a lawyer, or a politician is probably the best example, when they start sort of speaking like in a way that's really inconsistent with where they actually are. So let's say politicians in parliament, and I'm sure you've seen this in English language so far, are politicians in parliament, and they start speaking like a common day, everyday person who's less educated than what they actually are. So they're changing they're code switching to sort of this not uneducated as such, but lower socioeconomic status language. So I know an example is like Dan Andrews when he's like, no, sorry, not Dan Andrews. Gosh, what's his name? Anthony Albanese, when he starts saying Delulu with no Solulu. So obviously that's kind of when older people try to speak like teenagers, but also he's a really educated guy, and that's inconsistent with the place that he is. Like, we're not expecting him to speak like that in Parliament, but he then decides to speak like a common everyday sort of person that would speak in a common everyday sort of setting. So he's code switching there. Another example is, let's say you have entered a new soccer team or something, and you've realized that you don't have as much knowledge in this interest area or this hobby, or even if you've entered a new workplace, this occupation that everyone else around you does, you can try to code switch to fit in with those people by starting to bring some of their jargon or their slang into your speech. So I know that so if you entered like the soccer team, right, but you don't really know much slang or jargon about soccer. This is actually a bad example because I don't know much anything about soccer. A netball team, and then you start hearing everyone go, "Oh, here if you need or something," and you're like, "What does that mean?" But you just start saying it because you're like, "Oh, that's going to help me fit in with everyone." Like, even if it's not my interest, or I don't know enough about it yet. You sort of code switch to this slang because it shows that you do have this interest and you're trying to fit in with everyone around you. So they're three examples, probably the ones you would use in your Unit 4 Area Study 2 essays. So then how do we actually unpack it in the essay? It's probably the biggest bit. So once you can identify someone's code switching because they're trying to connect with other people, you need to identify the identity of that person. So let's go with the age-related language example, because I think that's probably the most commonly used one. Like, a lot of people use it, and that's not a bad thing. It's worth using. So the identity of the person here, it would be like an older adult, right? Probably 40 plus, a parent age person. You don't say that exactly, but whoever your example is about, you identify the identity of that person as being like whatever generation they're in. And then the identity that they fit into, or that they're trying to fit into, sorry. So I've got the identity of that person, which we've got as an older adult, and the identity they're trying to fit into. Just ignore my slide typo there, which would be of a teenager, right? They're trying to fit into the identity of a teenager. Then think about, why would they want to fit in with this group? So for an older adult, why would they want to fit in with teenage group? Well, it makes them feel cooler, makes them feel younger. They're going to feel, more youthful and like refreshing. They might feel more entertaining, more fun. They might be trying to get on the level of their children. Maybe they're trying to connect with their kids. Maybe they're trying to, desperately bring back their, youth and feel cool like that. It's likely they're trying to connect with younger people or seem younger is generally the two sort of ways that we think about that. Whereas if we sort of thought of politicians or something, why would they try and fit in with a group of uneducated people or common everyday people that might be trying to get votes, trying to seem more genuine, trying to seem more like relatable, a lot of those things. So then we've considered why would they do this, and you really have to unpack that. Consider whether the code switching is actually working for them. So are they accepted by this other group? Think about if someone that that's older, like a parent or someone, a teacher even, who starts using this teen slang, consider if that is actually allowing them to be accepted into the in group of teenagers. Chances are, most commonly, it's not. Usually we see it and we're like, well, that's cringe. Why did you say that? That you're just copying us. Like, why would you do that? That's obviously not natural for you, whereas it's natural for us. So generally it doesn't work. Sometimes we have that odd like teacher who's like sort of on the brink of being younger, or is just so funny and uses the language so comedically that we're like, you're one of the girls. Like you fit in. You're now a teenager. We've designated, sometimes it works. But generally it's seen as cringe. So you want to identify that. Are they gaining covert prestige, which is basically the same thing? Are they gaining are they firstly in your group, and are they gaining like popularity in your group of teenagers? No, generally not. If it's not working, why? So we want to identify that this is because, and generally it is, this is because the identity that we have in that group and the identity that that person has are mismatched. So there's a mismatch between their identity and the identity they're trying to fit with, which just doesn't often sort of sit right with people, and it sort of feels, I suppose, a bit jarring, and it just feels unnatural and ingenuine. You know what I mean? So because of that, that's why it's not working. So you can kind of allude to that, as well as that, like often these sort of in-group like languages, I suppose, like teen speak, are created in order to sort of like exclude other people. So teens really want to have their own sort of secret language. Secret's a bit strong, but you know what I mean? Their own secret language that only they understand, and it sort of breaks them apart from everyone, and they feel like, yeah, we've got this thing that we get to do. So when other people try and sort of come into that circle and like sort of infiltrate and like use their language, teens are like, hang on, like this is just ours, and they actually don't want it to go beyond the sort of scope of their group. So you can sort of consider that as well, that they feel almost possessive over this type of language. And then the other thing is, what does the other group think about this attempt to code switch? Yeah, so generally that would be us considering adults as cringe, or that they're tryhards, or that they're just being silly or whatever. So you want to identify, and a lot of those like sort of overlap a little bit, but being able to sort of break that down and go, okay, who's this group? Who's the person trying to break into it? Is it working? Why not? Are they getting covert prestige? If it's not working, why not? And what does that other group think about it? So sort of just analyze the whole social situation, right, from like start to finish, and really being able to unpack like an actual person's motivations for trying to break into that group. So you want to put yourself into the shoes of the person code switching, and also the group they're trying to code switch into, and consider the sort of perceptions of both of those groups separately. Yeah, so this can make up basically, I would say, half of a paragraph. So let's say you were doing like in your essay. So let's say you were doing a classic essay with like three body paragraphs, and one of your body paragraphs was about age-related language. You could have an example of teens using their own language as your first example, and discuss how that shows they're creative and rebellious and all of that sort of thing, which would be covered in a different video. And then the second example in that paragraph could be about when older people try and use age-related language and how it doesn't really work for them. So I think that would be a really good approach to doing that. That I feel like that sort of structure fits really well with a lot of essay prompts, because often it sort of wants some nuance and a bit of disagreement, or like it sort of brings in a deeper discussion than if you just had two examples of teens using teen speak. So this offers something sort of a little bit different. And you can certainly use the occupation, interest, and hobby section for that, like their own paragraph. You would need to have a different example, obviously, and sort of in the same way of TeenSpeak, you probably want to have an example of people using it normally, like naturally, and then this, and same thing with SES, or socioeconomic status, or education. That'll be displayed through people's languages as well. Keep in mind occupation and this politician sort of area, they can overlap a bit, as politicians, obviously that is their occupation. So try and distinguish it more based on like socioeconomic status and education level. I hope that makes sense. Feel free to comment any questions you've got, and I'm sure someone in the team, if not me, will get to them. But yeah, thanks for listening, and don't forget to check out the rest of our videos. Thank you.